Second area is Iran. As you can see, the Russians are absolutely supportive of the Iranians, right? So what Vladimir Putin says is this absolute unprovoked aggression of US bombing against Iran has no basis and no justification whatsoever. For our part, we are making our efforts to assist the Iranian people. Okay, this was last June actually when America bombed Iran. The Chinese, on the other hand, are much more nuanced and much more diplomatic. So President Xi says, Israel's military operation against Iran has caused a sudden escalation of tensions in the Middle East. Military conflicts are not the solution of problems, okay? So the Chinese are much more muted. And this shows us that whereas the Russians are much more clear about their regional alliances, China does not want to participate in disputes among different nations, okay? All right, so one area of cooperation between Russia and China is trade routes, all right? So as we discussed previously in this class, what the Americans want to do is they want to block China from accessing global trade. And they can do that by closing off the Strait of Malacca, okay? And there's something called the Malacca dilemma for China, where if the Americans were to close off the Strait of Malacca, Chinese trade would collapse. So the solution is for China to build another route to the north, called the Northern Sea Route of Russia, okay? But the problem with this is that now you're completely dependent on the Russians because you're going through Russian territory. Okay, so it's not an advantage of China to say, you know what, screw you, America, we're going to work with the Russians. They're actually better off balancing Russia and China. That way, they keep both of these routes open. Okay, this is the most economical, this is the most strategic way of accessing global trade. Okay, but the further you look, there are certain tension points in the relationship between Russia and China. First of all, this relationship clearly favors China, okay? So this is a map, a chart of Russian exports to China. And as you can see, it's mainly just energy, coal, LNG, crude oil, okay? That's the extent of Russia's exports to China. And what does China export to Russia? Mainly vehicles, electronics, and machinery, okay? So basically what China does is it takes Russian resources, converts them into manufactured goods, machinery, in its factories, and then exports it back to Russia. This is a very bad deal for Russia. It's a good deal for China, but it's a bad deal for Russia, okay? So that's one point of tension. Another point of tension is the dependence, okay? So basically, China and Russia may be best friends, but look at this, okay? So Russia's share in Chinese imports is only 5%. And then Russia's share in Chinese exports is only 3%. So economically, Russia and China are not that close. The problem, though, is that Russia is heavily dependent on its relationship with China because of all these economic sanctions imposed on it by the West, okay? So as you can see, what's happened after February 2022, when Putin invaded Ukraine and the West imposed sanctions on Russia, the relationship, the economic dependence on China has increased a lot, where in the beginning of the war, Russia didn't have that much in renminbi. But now, the renminbi accounts for over 40% of Russian imports, okay?